Welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Boxing Report. Episode 350. After taking roughly 3 weeks off, we're back. I'm your host, Michael. Joining me, the usual cast of characters: Gail from Communities Digital News, um, NY Fights, as well as Daniel from Four Boxing News and the Inscriber. What's going on, lady and gent?
Hey, welcome everybody. And yes, we are going to go there tonight. Stick around.
Yeah. Provocative title. Indeed, for those who are checking us out live, for those who are new to Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report live YouTube show, podcast, and website discussing all things sweet science. The motto is when boxing is good, we'll talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, it will get talked about. If you want to find any and all information, please check out the site. I need to update it some more, but I'll get to that eventually. P4pboxingreport.com. If you want to email us with questions, suggestions, complaints, what we're doing good, bad, or indifferent, you can do so at P4pboxing at P4pboxingreport.com. On the site itself, you'll find links to where to follow us all over social media on Facebook, Meta, whatever they call it nowadays, IG, Twitter, Tumblr, YouTube, um, where you can donate. Got a Cash Me PayPal donation link. And even though I am not no longer, I'm holding back on the coaching for beachbody.com. I would still suggest you check out Beachbody on Demand. If you're looking to get yourself right, heading as we're now into 2022, please check out Beachbody on Demand. Um, all kinds of fitness programs or whatever to suit whatever interest, whatever your interest. If you're looking for a boxing-based program, please check out 10 Rounds, 8-week boxing-based program, uh, 3 days of boxing-based cardio, 2 days of weight/resistance work. Check out any other programs on Beachbody on Demand on BOD, whether it's bar blend, whether it's PIO, whether it's morning meltdown, whether it's the old school P90X series, where yeah, some think they are outdated, but they still work. I'm here as a testament to that. The 6 weeks of the work, the 645, which hit the masses last month. Uh, Lift four for those who like to lift weights, uh, any and everything else in between, and take advantage of that 2 week trial for 2 weeks throughout the year. Uh, that trial is for 2 weeks. You get free access to all programs on Beachbody on Demand. So please check out BOD if you choose to. Let's get things going. Not a lot of fights to talk about in terms of breakdown. Not a lot of fights to talk about, and really in terms of what we're going to preview. So let's get things going. Um, Look, I go to you, Gail. Ladies first, always. Look, we often chide Gary Russell, call him Mister Once a Year, because for the past 5, 6 years now, um, he's only fought once a year. Well, his first fight in 2 years took place this past weekend as he fought mandatory challenger Mark Magsayo, and some would say the years of inactivity finally caught up to him as Magsayo defeated Russell uh, by decision, close decision, to gain the to claim the WBC title. Uh, the thing that most people are talking about in the aftermath was that Russell was fighting hampered, injured his shoulder. A lot of discrepancy in terms of who fans and whatnot who were judging the fight on social media. Um, I think Daniel, you had the scorecard pretty wide. I personally had it pretty even. I had it a draw at the end of the day on my scorecard. I go to you, Gail. What did you have? What was your score? How did you score the fight? And your thoughts on the action, and especially in terms of Russell and some of the comments that he said afterwards.
Even with the 2 year layoff, my expectations were for Russell were, fairly high considering anybody else out 2 years. Yeah, we would be very skeptical of a good performance. But Russell's a gym rat. He's been out for long stretches before. not real convinced that Magsayo had what it took. But there were a lot of mitigating factors. They all added up. It wasn't any one thing. It wasn't just the 2 year layoff. It wasn't just his family situation, which admittedly has been very difficult, very distracting the last year or two. His father's been ill due to his diabetes. His brother passed away. He's had losses in the family before. Years ago, another brother passed away. So it's in, the COVID situation, not been easy on most people. So he had all those distractions. His father's his trainer. He and his brothers have been cornering each other, Antoine and Antonio Russell, Gary Antoine, Gary Antonio. We got a everybody's kid's name George situation here. Um, and then you had Russell hinting that he had an injury before the fight, very low key. Didn't want to say what it was. Well, as we all saw, it turned out his right shoulder wasn't right. And after the fight, he said it's an injury that he's been nursing on and off since he was in the Olympics as an amateur. Didn't want to have surgery. I don't blame him there. Surgery is your last resort. So apparently he, through physical therapy, building up the muscle, girdle around the soft tissue injury, he's been okay until this weekend. And clearly once he was out of the third, fourth round, Magsayo had either caused a re-injury or Russell caused it by, his offensive effort. So he was a one-armed fighter. The truth is, it finally made him focus on the fight a little better than he had in the first early rounds. So considering he was a one-armed fighter, he performed really well. But he was still a distracted, ring rusty, one-armed fighter. And he just didn't have it. He just didn't have it. And none of the reasons came off to me like an excuse. They were what they were. Magsayo had a very good night. He slipped focus a little bit in the middle rounds, which are the ones that I gave to Russell, but I scored it a very toward the edge, 117, 111. Now, 115, 113 didn't bother me. 116 wouldn't have bothered me. The draw, I know a lot of people had it a draw. That was not close. Just you look at the eye test. I get it. You score 12 individual 3-minute fights. That's how scoring works. But you look overall and tell me who won. Magsayo clearly won. He directed the action. He was backing Russell up. He outlanded him 3-1. And Russell had completely abandoned the jab because of his injury situation. So it was Magsayo's fight. It was not Russell's night. I imagine that after having been out of the ring 2 years, he just couldn't let the fight get canceled due to an injury. I can see that was the thinking. It didn't work for him. It didn't work out. And he had no wiggle room to cancel the fight. If you're Emmanuel Navarrete and you say, I'm injured, I got to cancel, well, you probably fought 3 or 4 times in the last 12 months and you're going to be back in 6 weeks. So what's the big deal? Russell can't do that. So it was not a good night for him. And then he stomped on it and made it worse by going onto his Instagram feed about an hour after the fight and whining, I won 10-2. It was all MF politics. That's why I lost. A lot of excuses. You know what, Gary, you didn't need to do that. We all saw what happened. Get your head right. Get yourself well. Get your family situation straightened out and come on back. We'll be happy to see you, especially if it's sometime in 2022, hopefully before the middle of the year.
Part two of the 4 criteria, Danielle, for me are effective aggressiveness. Well, 3 of the 4: effective aggressiveness, accuracy, and defense. And the thing that had that the reason I had the fight closer than Gale was, though Russell was hampered and not throwing as many punches, right? I thought through large portions of the fight, his defense was exemplary. Um, I mentioned on Twitter, I was able to catch this fight after getting home from work, right? That I love how Russell was turning and spinning Magsayo, making him miss. And whenever he would throw shots, particularly with the straight left hand, more times than not, he was able to land with it. Um, that swayed the fight closer to me, particularly over the second half of the fight. You just checking out your feed and some of your comments on Twitter, you had to fight a much wider margin, more kind of closer in line with Gail. Your breakdown of the fight and what was your reason for having the fight in Magsayo's favor, excuse me, by a wider margin?
Well, my initial scorecard actually stayed the same after watching it. After watching it the second time around, because luckily I stayed up long enough to watch the second time I went around in the morning on the show stream, and I had it 116, 112 because unfortunately the main thing that bothered me when it came to Russell is even though he was doing a great job in the middle rounds, and even though he was doing something that Al Bernstein has pointed out, was making Magsayo turn in the exact opposite way you want to turn when you're fighting a southpaw. You're running in where Magsayo was a good amount running into his left hand, but he wasn't trying, even if the shoulder was hurting a little bit, just to try to pop it a little bit, just to do a little pop shot jab to mitigate Magsayo coming in forward. And more often than not, that led Magsayo to land one or two punches where he could have landed three or four. And that's what I saw more. The middle rounds where Gary Russell, and along with the 12th, where he was starting to come in. But unfortunately, at that point, you could tell. It's the fifth round, I think it was, when he tried to throw an overhand right on Magsayo, where you saw the shoulder buckle a bit. That's where you saw the injury. And if you look below, his right leg did not look right. You could tell, like I said, this left leg he had more muscle definition, muscle tone. The left didn't have as much. That may have been the injury he was pre-telling, because even before he hurt the shoulder, he just wasn't as fluid. He wasn't as active as he normally was. Now, part of it was the layoff, obviously, but in the end, that's unfortunately what wound up costing him. And it became worse after. It became a little bit worse after the fight, because I understand a lot of people do feel like you gave a boxing lesson, because there is a school of thought that you can't give too much credit to being the aggressor. But then he, like Gail said, he went on Instagram and just pulled a full broner and tried to say win 10-2. When I'm sorry, Gary, like I respect the fact that you were able to fight for 6 years with that title. Granted, it was only once a year for a lot of times, but he didn't know. You didn't win that. You didn't win that fight. Like eight to four, I have it 8-4, 7-5. I can agree with a draw. I could see how somebody can score a draw. I just wouldn't agree with it. But it is what it is. Unfortunately, a lot of things catch up with cat out career. So it's the time off, unfortunately, the family issues, an injury that you've been dealing with for almost a decade. That has to be settled. That has to be fixed before you do anything. And hopefully he's going to take the time to do it. I don't think we're going to see him again this year, because he probably does have to let himself recover. And that ultimately probably means that he's probably not going to get the rematch with Magsayo immediately afterwards because they're not going to have him wait until Gary Russell Jr. for the rematch, especially when there's unifications that could be easily made.
Your mic is a little bit low, Daniel, so you may have to adjust your volume for a little bit. You mentioned that Russell is probably going to be out for the year or a significant amount of time because surgery is probably needed for his shoulder. So let's focus on Magsayo here before we move on. He has the belt. He's promoted by Pacquiao, right? Really good story. Question on the table for whoever wants it. With 100, because Russell's losing, featherweight is pretty open. I would argue you don't have a definitive guy at the division. Um, where do you where do how does Magsayo fit at 126 pounds?
Well, he's got a lot of options. He's got a belt that makes him a very attractive fighter. The fight I think a lot of people would like to see that I'm not quite sure Magsayo is really ready for would be to tackle Emmanuel Navarrete. I think that's biting off a lot. He might want a homecoming fight in the Philippines, especially if he feels pretty unscathed from this fight. It didn't look like he had taken a whole lot of damage. So if he's, unblemished, feels like after a few weeks off, he could start getting back in the gym. Maybe in the late spring, he wants to think about his first title defense being something at home, maybe promoted during a break in campaigning by his promoter, Senator Pacquiao, which would be big, big, big doings in Asia. And then, maybe in the summer, he thinks about a title defense back here in the United States. Obviously, unification fight makes a lot of sense. A rematch does make sense down the line somewhere. See how ambitious he is and how much money he wants. I have a feeling his demands won't be overly aggressive unless knucklehead Sean Gibbons gets involved. So we'll see what happens. I wouldn't mind seeing him fight Navarrete, but I do think that's a little much for him right now.
Quickly, what say you, Daniel?
It's interesting. It'll be interesting to see where he shapes up because obviously he's when this fight he's more in line with the PBC. If unifications are in his forte, then there is an open fight against somebody that could be just as vulnerable in many ways. Leo Santa Cruz, who still holds the WBA featherweight title. And then
How he hasn't fought in that division in so long. How?
I know. We got to remember this is the same one that just ordered today, Tank versus Rolly too, or Tank versus Rolly again. But there's that. Navarrete is not going to be an interesting deal as far as how it can be made because unfortunately it is top rank. So there could be some barriers there. The one probably wild card that we can see, and it depends on what Mr. Eddie Hearn wants to do. Why not try to make a stake to go with the old man Kiko Martinez, who just upset Kid Galahad? Go after that, and then maybe bring in on a fight with Santa Cruz, bring in 2 belts, make the unification a little bit bigger. But those options are open. And a homecoming fight would be good, but I don't think it'll happen probably this year. We're considering who the other contenders are.
Any words on this, Gail?
Yeah, Santa Cruz has a fight scheduled the 5th, so weekend after next when boxing starts getting back into action. Um, let's see how he looks. He's been off for quite some time himself, and that is a more makeable fight. Although, as we know, um, Mr. Heyman has always protected Leo. Leo is practically family to him. Leo named one of his kids after Al Heyman. So they're not going to put him in harm's way. He was very ambitious taking on Davis, and certainly he got rewarded for it monetarily. And Mr. Heyman saw to that. But I don't think they're liable to do that again with him. And Leo's on the downside of his career. It does set up a fun Mexico versus the Philippines matchup, and if you place that in Southern California or Vegas, it'd be a huge turnout by both their fans. Both their fan bases would definitely come out for that.
Um, I'm not. I wasn't. I didn't have this fight planned when I sent out the docket earlier, but since long time friend of the show, Gus, aka Corruption in Boxing, mentioned it in the chat. Appreciate you for listening, Gus. Shout out to Ronald Harris, who's checking us out as well. Make sure to hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe as well. Let's touch a little bit into the rematch between Subriel Matias and and Petros Ananyan. Matias stopping Ananya in 9. Um, the medic, the coroner, stepped in and said that basically looked at Ananya after the 8th round and said he had had enough. He had had enough. He didn't look good on the ropes. And I'll go to you, to Gail, to touch on this fight since Gus made the comment. I'll show it right here for everybody who's checking us out live. Have to give Gail a lot of respect. Gail picked out Matias as a beast when he only had 6 fights. He was on that show. Indeed, you were. This was a reach match, as I said. They fought in 2020, February 2020, I believe it was. And Ananya beat Matias by decision, put him down in the 7th. It was a case where Matias Gale got off to a good start, but Ananya came on in the end, and as Matias slowed down, Ananya picked it up, and he really took control over the second half of the fight. Going into this rematch, I felt it was going to be a repeat of that first fight, but to Matias' credit, uh, the punch rate, the conditioning, he seemed to step it up. He landed combinations after combinations on Ananya's face all night long. Uh, Eventually put him down. I believe it was in round 8, towards the end of round 8. After that round, he was wobbly going back to the corner, and the ringside doctor, she looked at him, and I was looking at him, was like, okay, he's still not steady. He looks kind of out of it. So I wasn't mad at the stoppage. Since Gus mentioned you and Matias, I'll give you the floor to discuss the fight, Gail.
Well, thank you, Gus. In fact, your memory is a little bit longer than mine. Boy, I didn't remember saying that. I do remember thinking that. I'm glad that Matthias proved me right. The loss to Ananyan was a little fluky. I mean, it was a razor thin unanimous decision at the time. It was truly one of those, I think 2 of the cards were 95-94. And that's including the knockdown. So the knockdown was absolutely the difference in the fight. And Matthias just, he got caught a little too confident. Since that fight, normally somebody loses a close one like that, they take a tune-up. Matthias has fought since that fight with Ananyan, the first one, 2 guys who were undefeated. Malik Hawkins took him out in 6. Dukenbaev took him out in 8. And yes, not only has he had 2 good wins since then, he's also far better conditioned, which is a good thing because the first fight was 10 rounds. This fight was 12. And those 2 men went to banging from the opening bell and never let up. It was relentless. The pace was crazy. Um, and worse yet for both of them, their accuracy wasn't bad at all. It was a broom closet fight. Can't say phone booth anymore since we don't see phone booths. So let's call it a broom closet fight. They're both trying to sweep up each other. I would have liked to see Matthias be a little bit more responsibly defensive, but he seemed like he was taking it fine. He was the one pouring on by far more damage. Ananyan was down in round 9, and at that point, it made him so far behind on the cards. uh, Wisely, the ringside referee, with ringside physician Dr. Nina Radcliffe, and the referee conferred and decided he was done. That was a really good call on their part to protect him. There was just simply no point to let him go through 3 more rounds of that. The fighters are better off taking one huge shot, going down, boom, done, than grinding through 9 rounds like that. That kind of punishment really accumulates. And at this level, no point. So bravo to Matthias. He exacted his revenge exactly as he wanted to. In fact, he really did put a beating on Ananyan. Um, Puerto Rico is always looking for a new hero in boxing, and this guy is wildly entertaining. He's a lot of fun, never disappoints. He is getting better. We're watching him improve fight by fight. Um, and he's in that interesting lightweight division at 140 with a lot of options, especially if the day comes along, and we think it will in the near future, that Josh Taylor relinquishes those 4 belts. There's going to be a lot of party favors out there to play for. And I'm sure that Matias will be able to gain one of those belts.
Yeah, all things on hold in terms of getting a title shot because of Taylor, him having the undisputed belts. He fights Jack Catterall next month. But in the interim, an interesting fight I would like to see at 140, Matias versus Progress. I think it'd be a heck of a fight.
Oh, give me that. Yep, I'm right there for that.
So yeah, absolutely excellent win. Pure violence in the ring. Boxing Twitter was on their feet, applauding what they saw, commenting on what they saw, and like I said, yeah, very impressive win for Matias, and I'll just put it out there again. Um, I would love to see him fight the likes of Progress. Let's just say later on this summer. Be a very very good fight. Let's move on, and I'll go to you, Daniel. The that card took place this past weekend. The weekend prior, um, you had the return of Joe Smith, long-awaited return of Joe Smith. He was set to fight in October. Um, his opponent issue his opponent had to pull out due to issues of COVID, and then Joe Smith came down with COVID. Where he finally got in the ring against a late substitute by the name of Geffrard, right? That took place on on the 15th of January, basically in Joe Smith's backyard of Verona, and Smith pretty much dominated the action, kind of wore down Geffrard. Uh, to me, I felt he kind of just kept it in first gear uh, throughout the fight. Geffrard was there, but he seemed to be hesitant to pull the trigger. I thought getting a golden opportunity, he would be more aggressive. Turns out he wasn't. And you could just see slowly as he started to precipitously kind of back off and kind of cave in. And I ain't going to say he quit, but he didn't want to fight anymore at a certain point. Smith stopped him in the 9th round, right? Let's move
Mm-hmm.
forward, Daniel. There are options on the table for Smith, most notably a proposed unification bout with Artur Beterbiev, who not too long ago stopped Marcus Brown in 7. What I'm hearing, I'm pretty sure what you're hearing is there's a negotiations happening right now for a fight between Beterbiev and Smith late spring, early summer. I believe at MSG. There's also there's also the possibility of him in a fight against Anthony Yard, who's his number one contender. Smith's number one contender. Um, there's talk about Bertabiev. From what you're hearing, the likelihood of that negotiation being finalized.
It it does sound like it's probably the way Mr. Arum wants to position Berturbiev with Joe Smith, barring a late stage negotiation with one Canelo Alvarez. That's probably going to be the direction it's going to go. I know MSG, I know it's been caught in the venue. I think one arena that really got to focus on, because it is technically on Long Island, technically on Long Island, even though you just cross the street and you're in Queens, is the new UBS Arena, which is the new home of the New York Islanders, which actually does have also a station for DLIRR, the Long Island Railroad, which can make an easy trip for a lot of Joe Smith fans out here in Suffolk County. And Berturbiev would get a lot of love from like the Eastern with the Russians that coming in from Brooklyn and the city. So there'd be a pretty even playing field. The main thing it's gonna stick into is how much are they gonna push when it comes to Anthony Yard, because this is gonna be Anthony Yard's second shot at the same title. The first time he had to go to enemy territory against Kovalev. Kovalev showed that at that point he wasn't ready. With Joe Smith, he's a champion, but the caliber of opponent does go down a bit compared to Kovalev at that stage, granted, at that stage in Kovalev's career. So there's probably a more shot when it comes to Anthony Yard. But everything has to depend, because Berturbiev, that's going to be the avenue that they want to go to, barring a situation that Canelo opens up. And then after that, if he goes through that, then you can either challenge Canelo or go after the other Russian, the Russian that you got close to beating if in the final rounds of the fight, Dmitry Bivol. So there's a lot of good things when it comes in Joe Smith. He just has to probably put on a better performance than what he did, because I agree, Mike. He did not look like his normal explosive stuff. It looked like he was going through the motions.
Very mid in terms, if I had to describe how he fought against Geffrard. You mentioned Canelo, of course, during our time off. During our time off, the hot rumor is now that Canelo could fight WBC middleweight champion Jamal Charlo in April. You don't know no real update on that. You never know what Canelo, and quite frankly, you never know what with Charlo either. But we'll see where it goes in terms of the future for Joe Smith. I like the Bertabiev fight. I like the rematch with Bivol. If Canelo says he if Canelo is interested, he will jump to the front in terms of that. He will jump to the front of the line there, and Arum is no fool. He will take that opportunity to negotiate that bout as well. So it's up in the air in terms of the future of Joe Smith, and keep in tune with Pound for Pound Boxer reports for the latest on that. Let's move on to some news here, Gail, and this is where things will start to really intensify and make it controversial here. The situation with Alexander Usyk and Anthony Joshua Gill. Um, as boxing fans know, Usyk traveled to enemy territory, defeated Joshua in his backyard to become unified heavyweight champion, winning IBF, BA, BO belts. Right, Joshua exercised his rematch clause. A lot of us thought that the two would fight next, possibly April, but over the last 24 hours, and I wrote about this for Three Kings Boxing. Please check out threekingsboxing.com, your source for boxing information. Um, Rumors have now come out over the last 24 hours, Gail, that Joshua is at the very least entertaining, taking step aside deal, reportedly 15 million. AJ came out with a video on social media saying basically it's fake news and just media BS. But uh, Joshua is supposed to meet with Eddie Hearn. We're doing this episode live on January 24th, Gail. So there's supposedly a meeting. Eddie Hearn said he's going to meet with Joshua tomorrow, Joshua and his management, to discuss matters. What do you make of all of this? Is Joshua on? Is Will he accept a step aside fee? Will we see a rematch between Usyk and AJ, or are all things leading towards a possible unification bout between Usyk and one Tyson Fury?
Well, the bottom line here is that Anthony Joshua is not the guy in the driver's seat. Alexander Usyk, you'd think would be in the driver's seat because he's got all but one belt. All right, take that back. He's got a belt. It's Tyson Fury who's in the driver's seat. Not only does he have the majority of the belts, he's the guy that people pay to see. So he's going to be the one to make the decision about who he faces next. And, knowing how he operates, I'm sure he would prefer to fight Usyk because there's so much more upside. Joshua, no doubt, Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua would fill any venue of any size in Great Britain. But, there's not a lot there for Tyson Fury other than the bragging rights. Which, that's a nice thing. And the money, that's pretty good too. But Joshua doesn't have anything to fight for, and Usyk does. So that's going to be the big question. Where does Fury go? And then you've got, Dillian White. It's out there floating around. So once again, we've got lots of possible dance partners in the heavyweight division. But bottom line, Joshua is not going to be the guy to make the decision. So if he isn't the one getting the fight, why wouldn't he take a check to stay out of the way? Absolutely, he should take it. He'd be crazy not to take free money. You tell me, listener, you're within the sound of my voice, live or later, that you wouldn't take free money to do nothing. And I'm always sort of perplexed by people who get outraged about the whole step-aside money issue. The sanctioning bodies come up for massive criticism from a million different directions, yet we all rise to defend them when it comes to the whole step-aside money thing. I've never pieced that together all that well. If it makes sense for you, the fighter who's in the business to make money, because this is a job, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? Especially if it doesn't mean you're going to be out of the ring for years and years. If we're talking months, for Pete's sake, take the money. I see absolutely no problem with that. Your mileage may vary.
Do you agree, Daniel?
Yes and no, unfortunately. Yes, in the sense of the fact that as a business move, it makes sense should Fury decide to move forward with this. Now, what can also happen is they made Eddie trying to force his hand, might try to force the white thing to be really mandatory. And we've seen what Tyson Fury does when somebody tries to tell him what to do when it comes to the belts. He was supposed, right after he won the titles the first time against Klitschko, he was supposed to face an IBF mandatory. He pretty much told the IBF to go F themselves and drop their belt. He could do the same thing with the WBC because you can tell him, here's a little trinket, because when it comes to the perception, when it comes to the marketing, when it comes to what he's did, and this is one of the things that the Wilder trilogy helped him a lot, he will still be seen in many eyes as the champion, the guy. Yeah, he doesn't have a belt, but nobody beat him for it. That's going to be the telling part of it. And as far as the money, I think the report that which we have to read came. It was reported by the Daily Telegraph in the UK. This is a trial balloon. It was a trial balloon to see how the British public would react to that scenario because unfortunately Joshua he has made his image. He has built himself to be a decent image that does have unfortunately some chinks in the armor when it comes to certain actions of his and how he's perceived. That he's become more safe first when he won the Klitschko fight despite being knocked down, and then after he lost to Andy Ruiz, and we saw that a little bit with Klitschko. Sorry, not Klitschko, with Usyk. So that part plays a factor into it, but you have to agree, Gail. We have to agree in that front. If it's free money and if you're willing to give it, why not? Why not take it? Because you're already technically searching for a new trainer, even though you don't want to say that you're looking for a new trainer. You are, and that gives you more time to look at it. Then you can look at the Reynoso camp again. You could look at Manny Robles again. You can start looking at Robert Diaz, Joe Goosen, Robert Garcia. So there's a lot of fighter and a lot of trainers that he can look into while this is all being sorted out. Because at the end of the day, Tyson Fury is going to decide what's going to happen. He fights Dillian White, which forces the hand, of the Usyk situation. They pay Joshua the money so he can fight Usyk, or Tyson Fury is Tyson Fury. He just drops a belt, and then you have this chromatic situation where you might wind up seeing a wilder wild white fight for a Bacon WBC title. But I want to blame the man if he took the money. I really wouldn't, especially after the way that he lost to Usyk.
Okay, how can I put this? How can I put this? Would I like to see Joshua go straight away and fight Usyk again and get some get back? Yeah, but the issue is what you said, Daniel. He's in search of a new trainer. Just from a just being logical about this. If they want to fight again in April, that's a quick turnaround when he technically as of now hasn't hired a new guy. There has to be a period of orientation. You got to be get used to a new voice, to a new ear, uh, to a new and whatever he's trying to bring to the incorporate into Joshua's game. Can you do that? Say 3 4 months from now, it's tough. It's tough. So if Joshua wants to be his best self, and he's talking about becoming, he has to be a pit bull uh, in a rematch. That takes some time, and given that context, if he's going to take a step aside fee for Usyk, I get it. I get it. A lot of money, and he's still wild, adjusting to someone new in the corner. Um, so I lean, though my gut, my spirit say, go get it back, go get it back. My head says it would make sense for Joshua to take the money, uh, get right fully, uh, body, mind, and spirit, because he's going to need it in a rematch with Usyk, because there were a lot of folks heading into that fight felt that he could be in real danger, and it showed the case. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult to win the rematch. So on balance, I tend to agree with both you and with you, Gail and Daniel. Let's move on to let's get to the controversial aspect of this episode. Let's get down to it. During our time off, right? Uh, Big news came through as Terence Crawford, who was on the outs with Bob Arum. The fight with Sean Porter was his last fight with Top Rank. As we all know, Crawford stopped Porter in the 10th round. In the aftermath, in the post-fight press conference, he basically said he's done with Arum now. Um, Bud has filed a lawsuit against Arum. One of the things that he alleges is that Arum, he alleges racism against Arum. But and I'll go to you on this one. I'll go back to you on this one, Daniel. Uh, Based on conversations with those who have read the lawsuit in full, while the racism aspect gets most of the spotlight and talk, uh, devil's in the details, and there's a lot of underlying things going on here uh, uh, between Arum and Bud, and underlying things that Bud alleges that Arum didn't live up to in terms of contracts, and he basically said that when it comes to Arum promised things that he never got, and that seems to be more of his issue, along with the allegations of racism by one Arab. Your thoughts?
This is going to be a very complicated case in the fact of the matter that first they want to take this to federal court, which means you have to establish reasons why it's going to be in federal court. The easiest way to do it, the thing is, what they're trying to do is say Crawford, he resides in Omaha, Nebraska. Top Rank Incorporated is based in Las Vegas, Nevada. So they'll say that that crosses state lines. They have to cross state lines to do commerce. So that'll falls in line of the federal court system. Here's the part where it gets dicey because I did listen to a Twitter space that had somebody that actually was reading parts of the lawsuit. He didn't read it fully, but he read enough of it where he understood what some of the game plan was. And one of the areas that had to fall into it was the racism, because you have to word it a certain way in order to get certain things done in discovery. Because if the lawsuit specifically words that in the accusations that Bob Arum favors white fighters over minority fighters, Top Rank will just easily point to Oscar Valdez, Shakur Stevenson, Jamel Herring. Now in no way say we promote and we we promote these champions, Latino, Black, Asian. How are we just now only benefiting white fighters when two of these fighters, almost all of them, got their championships under our umbrella? From what the conversation was, if he words it in the way where he says that Bob Arum negatively affects black fighters or abuse black fighters specifically unfavorably, then you can open certain things, because then you open Bob Arum to some of the comments that he himself has made when it comes specifically to Terence Crawford, particularly that he wasn't a pay-per-view buy, that he lost money promoting Crawford. Something that you don't hear him say to almost nobody else in his stable. So there's that aspect that falls into it, but what's probably going to fall into it, because one of the key factors is the Spence fight. The Spence fight is apparently is a key into this lawsuit. The negotiations will fall into it, and that's where I think Crawford's people want to get a hold of that contract, the way and with the way it's written. And if they're able to do it, if they're able to get to discovery, what they want to prove is that Bob Arum, when negotiating the Spence fight, was not negotiating in good faith. Which, unfortunately, considering, like I said, the cold relationship between him and Al Heyman, is believable. Whether it can actually be proven is another question. It just depends how long it's going to go. And what's probably going to be the bad part of it is that a lot of these lawsuits, they just mainly end in a settlement, a pretty quick one at that. Those lawsuits for $10 million, more than likely, they can settle for $6 million in that area. But that's if with both parties are clear-headed. We all know how stubborn and bullheaded Bud Crawford is at times. And unfortunately, that is a trait that is shared by Bob Arum, along with his pettiness. So there's a realistic chance that we may not see Bud Crawford fight this year. Because he'll be too busy dealing with this in the courtroom, because either he'll want to drag it out or Bob Arum will force him to drag it out. So this is a good thing to keep an eye on. We see these lawsuits once in a while. Obviously, there's loaded language, but the devil's always going to be in the details.
Is Arum a racist? Uh, I'm not going to sit here and say whether he is or he is not. Um, if Crawford, to your point, Daniel, language puts it in the context of he wasn't being promoted to the best of his ability. Okay, fair enough. Given how Arum has leading during this whole saga that took out that came out in public in 2021 openly, it can be argued that he threw him under the bus by saying that he's just not marketable. He's doing all this, and he's just not a sellable product. And I will argue, okay, I would push back against that. There are things that Arum could have done for Bud. Could Bud have maybe done some more television interviews and whatnot? Sure. But Arum, he's not absolved from criticism himself, right? So, and just overall in Arum's lifespan, is he just a pristine figure? No, because I remember back in the 80s where he justified and defended staging bouts in South Africa in the 80s, especially when uh, there were sanctioning bodies. Do your history if you doubt me. There were sanctioning bodies that refused to stage world title bouts in South Africa, which was still under apartheid. And there was a divestment movement around the world. Here in the States, there was an active movement to not engage in activity in sporting events and otherwise in that country. I mean, hell, the Olympics banned the nations banned then apartheid out South Africa, but yet he was staging bouts there and justifying it. I haven't forgot that. However, uh, on the surface, he has done business with all fighters from all ethnicities. So, in terms of the allegations from Crawford, let that play out. The other stuff, Gail, we can get into further in terms of how, according to Crawford, Arum promised him a fight against Spence or deal with for a fight against Spence by the end of 2020. It didn't come through. There was some bonus money apparently that Crawford was promised by Arum that he did not receive. Uh, so the racism allegations, let that play out. But the other things, yeah, that can be discussed in public in detail.
What everyone has to remember is that anyone can file a complaint, a lawsuit in civil court against anyone else for any reason. And that document is completely controlled by the person making the allegations against another party. This is a lot different than criminal cases where you don't even get to file a criminal case as a prosecutorial agency unless there's some minimum proof that there's reason to connect a person to certain crimes. In a civil court, you can walk in there and say anything you damn well want to. Just because it's on paper doesn't make it true. It's also the case that you want to file just enough information in there to convince a judge to say, yeah, there's enough here to go ahead and proceed toward a lawsuit, toward a trial. Very few get all that way in front of a jury. Nevertheless, the judge decides green light, red light. So you don't put everything in there. One of the criticisms I heard frequently about this filing is, well, did you read what Crawford's lawyer had to say about what Arum said about Bud? It's not all that much. It's not all that bad. Trust me, folks, it's not everything. It's not. I'm sure there's plenty more. Does it rise to the level that Crawford and his attorney are alleging? We'll find out. Maybe if it proceeds, maybe not if it doesn't. What's really at the heart of this, according to the lawsuit, the kernel at the middle, which is either true or not true and provable, is whether Arum promised Crawford a payment and whether or not it was in writing anywhere or communicated anywhere on the record, email, phone calls, text messages, whatever. If there's any fact to prove that Arum promised Crawford $900,000 if he couldn't get a fight made against Spence by the end of 2020. Okay, you have COVID intervening in there as well. That's going to make it extremely messy. So, yeah, will all the parties come to their senses, settle, and get this out of the way? Or will they decide to air out their dirty laundry in front of each other? One notable comment, and my dogs are very worked up about this, apparently. One note to make, Crawford's attorney, Brian Friedman, exactly the same attorney that represented Mikey Garcia in his lawsuit against Top Rank 8 years ago. And yes, it dragged on a bit, but it did settle out of court eventually. And all these years later, Mikey Garcia and Bob Arum have been seen being cordial to each other, including me seeing them sitting two rows in front of me chit-chatting. So never say never, folks.
So yeah, even though the story is technically a couple of weeks old, given the time off, I just felt we had to address it here. Where this lawsuit goes from here, it's unknown, but I tend to agree with Daniel that this is going to play out throughout much of 2022, which will probably mean we will not see Crawford in the ring for a while, not only because of this lawsuit, because he's technically a free agent, so things are up in the air with him right now. While I'm not going to just have a definitive thing, be definitive about the allegations of racism when it comes to Bob Arum, or the racist allegations when it comes that Crawford put down, laid on Arum. I'm not holding my tongue back on this next topic. I'll go back to you, Gail, to start this off. Paulie Malignaggi, former
We lost Mike, unfortunately.
We
But
did indeed, but let's go ahead and do the setup as he comes back in. This is some time back, so many of you have heard the setup of this situation. But Paulie Malignaggi, former professional boxer, long time recently Showtime boxing analyst until he got fired from Showtime a little less than a year ago. Um, Made an appearance on the new version of Steve Kim and Mario Lopez's show, The Three Knockdown Rule. It's a podcast that they've produced independently for a long, long time. Well, recently, a couple of weeks, maybe a couple months ago, Daniel, the show moved over under the sponsorship and
Yeah, sorry, folks, I lost connection there, but thanks
yeah, we're
for
starting to
picking up the
discuss.
slack, Gail. Continue on.
I'll go ahead and hand it off to you. Finish my thought. So the show in question, hosted by Mario Lopez and Steve Kim, was it was essentially I won't say bought out, but it has moved over under the banner and brand name of Triller. So the show is now being heavily promoted on Twitter, and I'm going to pause by putting myself on mute here because of my dogs. But essentially,
Nah, let the dogs bark.
made a
They're
very
just as
big
outraged as
deal
I
of
am,
the fact
so
that
I have no
Paulie
problem.
Malignaggi was coming on as a guest. Michael, take it from there. Triller.
Yeah, they were on the Three Knockdown Rule podcast by Kim and Lopez, and the topic of George Floyd came up. And let's just say, in my opinion, Malignaggi made some comments that were extremely out of pocket and bigoted, right? The way he depicted uh, uh, George Floyd as just some goon, as a thug, uh, who who was a drug addict and blah blah blah. And I go to you, Daniel. His comments, he basically gave an argument in which he gave tacit defense of the cops' actions. Now, for those who have been sleeping under the rock, Derek Chauvin was sentenced to life for his actions in what I feel is the murder of George Floyd. Um, Malignaggi went on to talk about how demonized Floyd and talked about, well, the cops, they don't have time to wait around for Floyd to do this and to do to that. Uh, uh, Basically criminalize Floyd. Um, and again, I say he gave justification for his actions. Kim was laughing in the background, and Lopez was complicit largely to all of this. And boxing fans universally were mad about this, were ticked off justifiably. As I've said previous episodes, all three of us uh, are in basically a private chat, on a weekly chat privately with a bunch of other writers and media members within the boxing community. The topic came up then, and nobody was happy about this, about everything. I'll get into more on this and why I'm upset with Malignaggi, why I'm upset with Kim and Lopez, who I think has shown a, I'll just say it, he's weak in terms of how he's acted through all of this. But I'll give you the floor right quick, Daniel.
Ah, first, I'll say it has not been a good couple of weeks for the Italian American community in the tri-state area. You had this mess. You had a guy throw a drink at a kid in Connecticut, and then calling that kid an immigrant loser. He, by the way, that person got arrested and lost his job as a financial advisor, Merrill Lynch. And then we had another couple that on the LIRR train just went after another family, an actual family that had a 10-year-old kid and went on this tirade of this these people invading, taking over the country. They have been fired from their job. So yeah, it's not a real good look for the Italian American community in the New York area, and we know Paulie Malignaggi is from Brooklyn. This is the bad part of the entire situation. Is that for the most part, and we have to look at all parties here. We all know Malignaggi's political leanings. He is a proud maggot. and as such, he has been
Did you
liable
say
to
MAGA or maggot?
maggot, maggot, and ultimate, and that gives him an avenue, especially with Steve Kim, who has had a nomadic career to say the least. Like he has done a good job as far as a writer, he has done a good job, but we've seen him go into a lot of areas. He's now he's now at the Conservative Writers Network. I think he writes for both Outkick and Glenn Beck's ilk in the Blaze. So that should pretty much tell you his views on a lot of things. What's probably the worst part of it, this was unprovoked. Like Paulie talking about George Floyd came out of nowhere. Like there was no point in that discussion in that area that it came around. And as much as he tried to put caveats on it, trying to say like the police officers are wrong, he gave every single talking point that the right has used when it comes to the George Floyd situation. And Steve Kim, obviously,
He fell back into tropes about Floyd that were racist in context. That's what
absolutely,
he
yeah,
did.
that's what it is. What's that? Every single right wing talking point that they've put in, Kim laughed at it, and Lopez kind of shied away to the side. Now, Gail put it out there. The three knockdown rule, the podcast was like us before. It was an independent podcast. It was something. It was something like of a passion project that they were doing, that Kim and Lopez, until it got picked up by Triller. Now they technically now have a sponsor. They have a financial backing. Suddenly, it falls into something where they have a vested interest in certain things, particularly when it comes to Mario. And this is where Mario falls. Unfortunately, weak in this scenario. Mario Lopez, first we all know, yeah, he was the actor AC Slater in Saved by the Bell, but what has made him known recently was his work as an entertainment guy. This guy that worked with Extra, who ultimately fell into working in boxing in many ways. Like he's been around in some fights, whether it's been as a guest or as a commentator, like he was a celebrity commentator, and it has landed him this position where he's had a podcast with a writer that is, for all this purpose, is respected. Steve Kim is a respected writer in the sense of what he has done in his field. I can't take that away from him. But as this has gone, the, Steve Kim has went from working at ESPN to now working, I think, for Outkick and The Blaze. And when you go from the worldwide leader in sports, granted that's how they market themselves, to being friends with somebody like Jason Whitlock, that's pretty much to tell you the fall that you befell yourself into.
Excuse me for interrupting. For those who are listening to this and will try to defend Kim by by saying that, well, he's friends with Jason Whitlock and he does a show with Lopez and does a show with Jason Whitlock. Uh, do better, try better. Some of my best friends of Black Argument. That doesn't fly in 2022. Carry on.
Oh yeah. Oh, that fall. Yeah, that perfectly actually falls into what I was gonna say, because now that Steve Kim is out with what he is politically, it makes a lot of his other things now seem shed into a new darker light. Because before he went in ESPN, he tried an independent endeavor. If people don't remember, it's our YouTube channel, the Undisputed Champions Network, and they did fairly well. That they had a weekly show It was them, Dougie Fisher, Mike Botka, and they had fighters in there. There was a series there with Larry Merchant. But then, when if you happen to see some of the shows, which I recommend you guys, which I recommend the audience to do, listen to what Steve Kim talks about now when it comes to the PDC. Specifically, then talking to demographics. Even though in, he was technically right in the beginning, it now has a different venom to it when the way he talked to it now. And unfortunately, this is a situation where we have to remember Paulie is still employed by somebody, by a major person in the boxing game. He is employed by Sky Sports. He's their play-by-play guy, I think. Play-by-play guy, the main analyst in fights. And he's obviously probably going to get booked on Triller to do other things. What makes this really, really, really bad is the fact that Lopez did not do anything to talk back, did not do anything to slightly in the best to push back. Because, like I said, we know what Malignaggi is. We now know what Steve Kim is. With Lopez, it just looks like he was just protecting his wallet. But silence in this matter is complicity. You not standing up to the fact that George Floyd, yeah, was murdered by a cop. A cop who's right now still appealing to go free, despite already being convicted of killing George Floyd. You not standing up makes you look like a punk, like a bitch, like a fuckboy. And quite frankly, in many ways, yeah, that's the area that Lopez has fallen into. He happened to get into the entertainment circles. He happened to find this niche in the boxing area, and now he's doing the best to try to protect it, even though being a human being comes first before your wallet.
Two things that are always ever present, Gail, worldwide: blackness and anti-blackness. And you don't have to be a quote unquote stereotypical white redneck hick Hoda to exhibit anti-blackness. That can come also from BIPOC, from POCs. Um, that's what we saw. That what we have. That's what. So Malignaggi, he is what he is. There's a reason, fans, that he got the boot. That Showtime gave him the boot is because of the things that he used to say about black fighters and black people privately. Stephen F. Spinoza wasn't having none of it, right? And he has continued that uh, uh, on social media platforms and on this particular episode, which you cannot find, by the way. So, Malignaggi, the irony is this is the dude who early in his career, it can be argued, appropriated black culture to a degree, where he's out here in a title defense over in England, braided up, bopping the hip hop and all this other stuff. And now, as he gets older, we see what he is. He's showing his true colors. Kim, the saving grace of this is that boxing writers like yourselves and others are seeing in Steve Kim what I noticed from him 10 years ago. Um, he was just more slick about it back in the day. He's just more open and overt about it now, right? This is why I say anti-blackness can be displayed by people of color as well. And why I say he cannot use, folks cannot use the fact that he's on the show with Whitlock to defend him, because that's Whitlock's MO. Uh, Bit of a small private note here. Uh, you know how black people can get a lot of hayway in mainstream media circles if they're willing to really go out and bash and demonize and dismiss the black community. That's what Whitlock does. Why do you think all of a sudden he's on the show with Tucker Carlson? Why do you think Steve Kim now is getting the mainstream coverage that he's getting now? That's what it is. And Kim has been doing this for a while now. I'm glad people are calling him out and chicken checking him for it. Now, where does Lopez? Why is Mario Lopez wrong here? One, this episode was at first released, was dropped in its entirety. You here to tell me that Lopez didn't have a say so in that, right? So he was okay with it. The only reason it got taken down was because he started to get heat about it. He started to get heat, but that didn't take away from the fact that he initially played a part in releasing it. And to Daniel's point, it's his complicity that's pissing me off. That's why I call him a punk. He's playing the game of the fact that he's the nice guy. He doesn't cause any trouble. He's safe. And he wants to get quiet about this, hoping that all the smoke blows over, right? He thinks he doesn't say anything. Mainstream sports outlets are not covering this at all. The only coverage you get from this is within the boxing community, right? And he's banking on that to say nothing. But instead of not saying anything, not giving comments, what does he do? When people are going at him and questioning him about this on Twitter, he's blocking folks. That's a punk move. So all three of them are culpable and deserve some criticism, as does Triller. They're mainstream now. Where is word from them? You've heard nothing. They've taken the episode down, but nothing else. At the very least, since Kim and Lopez, this is their show, why are not they not demanding those two, especially putting them in a position where they have to answer for this? So all of them should be held accountable. I'm mad at everyone on this. This is ridiculous, Gail.
This was an unmitigated mess of their own making. It's completely self-imposed destruction. Let's go backward. Nobody should be in the slightest surprised by Malignaggi's comments on the show. He's made them before. He made them a year ago about Floyd publicly. As you noted, he made similar comments. He got himself in trouble comparing Devin Haney to Vasily Lomachenko and made it a ethnic background, racial, nationalistic argument that was extremely racist. So, and you're right. When it was convenient for him to appropriate the culture as a professional fighter, where as an individual he can get away with a lot more behavior than he can when
he's a culture vulture.
That's
what he was.
And okay, back when you're a fighter, all right, you're going to probably get away with it in contests. When you work for one of the major networks, you have a different role to play. When you're working for Showtime, secondarily for Sky Sports, which is having boxing more or less taken away anyway. So, we don't really need to be too concerned about whether Paulie's employed there. Your standards of behavior are extremely different. You are now representing your employer, a broadcast network. And there are a lot of speech responsibilities that go with it he didn't have as an individual. That is why Showtime let him go more than a year ago. And clearly there was some kind of non-disclosure agreement for the term of their separation for a year. Well, that year was up and various parties were trying to get Paulie on to do an interview. he decided, for whatever reason, that the show with Mario Lopez and Steve Kim was his friendliest venue to air all the grievances he's been sitting on for a year. Now, I'll just leave you to answer that question for yourself, and I'm sure you can. Why did he pick that podcast and not one of the other millions of boxing podcasts, some good, some not so good out there? So it was kind of the perfect mix of a friendly environment where he could say what he wanted to and spout off, and visibility. And Triller and the producers of the show and the hosts of the show made a massive mistake. They absolutely had to have known what kind of stuff he was going to say. Now, if the hosts thought that was okay and they thought letting him be out there and provocative would call attention to the show, okay, that's one set of bad judgment. The producers of the show, now that it is a professionally produced, platformed show, should have done their due diligence and tried to dig out from Paulie what he wanted to talk about. It's not foolproof. I've worked as a broadcast producer. Occasionally a guest surprises you, but you know what? Not usually. And just, maybe 15, 20 minutes of research on Google would have showed you the kind of remarks he's made in the past. Knowing that he was going to come on and at the very minimum air his grievances against Showtime. Okay, do you really want to, go up against the Showtime machine? Pretty stupid. Let's also bear in mind that Showtime does business primarily, not completely, but primarily with a promotional organization that is Black owned, PBC. Really? Everyone thinks it's a good idea to keep somebody like Paulie on the payroll? If that's the case, it's just, for one thing, it's incredibly disrespectful. So here we go. Paulie does this thing, and the two hosts just sort of let him go. They don't challenge him. They don't question him. They don't pin him down at all. And suddenly it rises from their inability to deal with Paulie. Letting him on the show in the first place is the first mistake. Then they let him go. That's the second mistake. Well, now all of a sudden, who owns all of that? It's not Mario. It's not Steve. It's Triller. It's a broadcast network with massive deep pockets. And they knew they were in trouble. Ryan Kavanaugh had to know they were in massive trouble. And the biggest hit to them was the fact that Mario Lopez is their Jim Lampley. Hello? Triller hired Mario as the face of their new boxing network. He was the host for the Tyson and Jones event. He's been involved in their triad stuff. What a huge disaster and a mess for Triller. The only thing they could do to protect their investment in Lopez was to yank the show off the air and, I guess, hopefully pretend it never existed. Well, you know what, folks? You cannot do that. So a mess of epic proportions. Paulie, we know what Paulie is all about. Paulie is a first-generation immigrant. Steve Kim is also a first-generation American immigrant from very different backgrounds who think their experience is some kind of universal experience. It's not. And everybody needs to stop extrapolating their own individual experience to anybody else's. You can tell your own story. Stop telling everyone else's story. There's just so many layers to so much wrong here. But the truth is, the people that can fix it are the employers and the broadcasters, which makes them the publisher of the remarks and therefore responsible. And that's Triller. So let's watch what they do, because they're the ones at the center of the target right here. How are they going to act now that this has all happened? Well, it's been a couple of weeks now. We haven't been on the air, for a while. When this happened, it got pulled off the air immediately because the uproar, the absolutely correct uproar to what was allowed to transpire on this show, and it wasn't live. It was recorded. It went out there. Somebody actually heard this stuff and still let it go out there. There's just so many bad decisions along the way. But the truth is, the one I sort of blame the least is Paulie, because this is who he is. This is no surprise. We've heard him make most of these remarks before, and he was still allowed to go on the air. So is that Paulie's fault? No, he didn't hide who he was. It's all the people along the way who allowed this to happen. And I'm finally exhausted that discussion. There you go.
I mean, look, as soon as George Floyd, it's a boxing show. It's a boxing show. Why address that topic at all? It has nothing to do with sweet science. They should have told him, look, uh, whatever your opinion on that, let's stick to the sweet science. But yet they let him go on and on and on, and they think they slick, don't say anything about it, and then the next episode do a full length feature of Tim Bradley, have him on the whole show. Is what they think they're gonna have a black person on there that folks are gonna forget? No, sir. Don't pull the wool over our heads, mine especially. The sad thing is, even as I their attempts to basically have a CYA move is gonna work. It's gonna work because this is not being covered by Main Street sports outlets, and because this boxing is a niche sport. Um, it's gonna blow over, sadly. Uh, Next time Lopez is at a fight card, is at a fight event, the boxing media should ask them about this. Will they? I don't know. Next time Steve Kim is at a fight or at an event with fellow media members or the boxing media, excuse me, in mass, going to ask him about this. I don't know. Uh, Probably those meetings that we have weekly. Part of me wishes he would be on there and that I would be on there as well, because I'm not missing a moment. If that ever happens, I'm not missing a moment to mention him up. And I dare him buck. And I dare him to buck. Uh uh Malignaggi, you're right, Gail. He is who he is. Unfortunately. Um he should be called out to him, but he comes off as, now as he's gotten older, as a someone who is so recalcitrant and so full of contempt. You're not going to change him at this point. You're just not. Uh Daniel mentioned how he grew up and where he grew up and what he has not evolved but devolved into. That's who he is. But yeah, I'm glad that they're getting called out. My only wish moving forward, since this is not going to be covered by media in mass, my only hope moving forward is that boxing press, ourselves included, continue to not let this just die in the weeds. And like I said before, let Lopez, when Lopez makes an appearance at a mainstream show or boxing card or whatever, and if he's in front of media members, I just hope someone from the boxing media privately, publicly ask him about this and say, what the hell was up with that? With Kim, the boxing media needs to hold him accountable for that, because publicly he's been doing this for a while now, and he needs to get chin checked. He needs to be called out on this hard stop. And
Mm-hmm.
again, we just had to address this, since yeah, we've had
Yeah.
plenty of our say about this. I think you was wanting to say something, Daniel. If so, you can close this out for us.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say thing. I just wanted to end it like in this note that unfortunately I do agree with you that you're not going to get called back on the entertainment media on it. I saw the possibly TMZ is not going to go after Mario with it because Mario's one of the guys, one of the people. The main hope is going to be when somebody goes after, if somebody's going to go after when it comes to Kim and Malignaggi, particularly Malignaggi, because
For
he
me, it's
does work.
particularly Kim.
Yeah. Oh no, Kim.
He. You know how some people run their mouth and they basically talk themselves into a butt whooping.
Yeah.
Kim he's been going at this and he's been poking the bear, poking the bear, poking the bear. He's asking for it. He
Oh
really is.
no, he is. It's one of the reasons why he wound up in the spot that he's in now, because his career's been nomadic. As good of a writer as he is, we have to face it. He has burned some bridges. The
Yeah,
main,
because
the
low key, there are some folks that we all know who refuse to work with him now. Some prominent boxing writers who refuse to work with him now as a result.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why like I mentioned, that the thing he wanted to do on his own, the Undisputed Champions Network, how that fell apart. And unfortunately, like so, this is why I would say when it comes to Malignaggi, because yeah, he works for Sky Sports, and remember they still sometimes do work in the boxing field, whether it is with Matchroom or with Frank Warren. He's gonna get asked those questions over there because and that's ultimately going to be the downfall. But hopefully somebody else picks it up. Hopefully somebody that is in the mainstream, that is in the mainstream media, that is involved when it comes to writing. I can't believe I'm even saying this. It would probably be the first step in Mike Comforter's redemption if he went after him.
I know. You know
I
what?
would actually have some respect for Coppinger if he was to do a profile about this on ESPN.
Well, the only problem, which is unfortunate in this case, is who replaced Steve? Mike. So there's a bit of an issue there. Listen, the mainstream media,
Or someone like a Rayfield.
well, and Raphael, Dan Raphael is now an independent operator. But you know what? It, there's there's no payoff for Dan to get involved in this. He has really steered clear of this issue.
Or
All
Max Kellerman to mention it on his Max on Boxing's podcast.
well,
Man,
but
look.
but here's the problem. Who did they just interview? Tim Bradley. ESPN's not going to touch it. Listen, here's the deal. Paulie and Steve are nobodies as far as the mainstream media goes. They don't care. They don't know them. They're nobodies. Mario's a different story. Mario Lopez is really the one in the crosshairs and the one being protected here because he goes way beyond the podcast. He has his entertainment news hosting duties. He's the MC of a lot of entertainment programs. He's the main guy of Triller. And let us not forget, he plays key roles every year as, Mr. Lovable dad, lovable character in these Hallmark Christmas movies. He does at least one every year. Nobody wants to lose their investment in Mario Lopez as a good guy. So, guess what, folks? It's never going to happen.
Yeah, we've had our time to vent on that. Shout out to EJ Boxing Live for checking us out. Got to have you back on the show sometime, brother. Reach out to me. Got to have you back on the show sometime. Let's move on to I had to get that out personally because it's been on my chest and in my spirit for a while, and after some time off, is something I made an executive decision to at least bring this up because something had to be said, and I had to say something about it. Let's move on to some fights here. Like I said at the beginning, not many fights to break down, not many fights to preview. It's been kind of dry in the sport in terms of boxing action. I think it's going to pick up towards the end of the month. Well, next week and going into February, that's when the action is really going to start to pick up. I'll go to you, Daniel. Robson Conceicao. A lot of hardcore he has know him from his unsuccessful bid at trying to a bid against WBO feather, not WBO, but WBC junior lightweight champion Valdez, right? Um,
Hmm.
I will die on this hill and feel that Conceicao beat Valdez when they fought. What was it, October, November last year? A lot of controversy leading into that bout with the positive drug test from Valdez. He was slapped to fight anyway. Um, got in the ring. I felt that Conceicao outboxed him. Close fight, but I had Conceicao ahead on my card. He returns to the ring this weekend fighting a guy by undefeated fighter by the name of Xavier Martinez. Martinez from Sacramento, 17 and 0. Decent knockout percentage, but got a good win over Claudio Morero, Juan Carlos Borgos, right in his last two fights. So the competition level has stepped up. Here's my question, Daniel. In Conceicao's fight against Valdez, Conceição, terrific amateur pedigree, did an excellent job of boxing Valdez. Is how can I put this? Is Martinez from video? If you've seen video of him, is he on the level in terms of boxing ability and skill that we saw from Conceição against Valdez? For me, if that version of Conceição shows up, uh, I will give him the edge against Martinez. Your thoughts?
No, like watching Xavier, not quite there yet, but it's a reason why like he's in this prospect stage trying to move into being a contender. And Kazuka is actually the good gatekeeper to do so in this sense because, like you mentioned, in that Valdez fight, Valdez was not all there. We all know about the drug test. We all know how pretty much Valdez looked in that fight, and you're not alone in the sentiment that people feel that Conceicao won that fight. But he's now fallen to this. He's now into this spot where he's gonna be the gatekeeper for Martinez. And while Martinez may not be as skilled as Valdez in the ring, he may have a little bit more pop at this weight than Valdez. Now, yes, we all know about the knockout with Berchelt that Valdez was able to do, but we know for the most part, especially from his later fights at featherweight to up to that fight, that he a lot of the power that he had wasn't there. Martinez has a little bit more pop in that aspect compared to Valdez, but he is not as skilled as Valdez, unfortunately, overall. So Conceicao should have a pretty good time, pretty good maneuvering when it comes to win. And yeah, it does hurt a prospect, but when you can have the argument that you should technically be a world champion right now, it's a good step in getting back into that title picture, especially if a rematch with Valdez falls into play after the Stevenson fight.
Quick assessment of this fight, Gail. Your keys.
We were talking prior to the broadcast, and I made this comment, and I'm going to make it here on the show. This whole card seems to me like one of the cards we saw 2 years ago in the bubble. Matchups were okay for what they were at the level they were, but we were not seeing, for the most part, championship caliber fighting, with apologies to several very talented fighters who did appear in the bubble, the first of which was Shakur Stevenson. So in retrospect, props to him. But, nobody is going to put up first-rate talent, attention-getting talent when we're competing with the NFL playoffs. Do you really think anyone would have been watching boxing yesterday? Hell no.
Oh
Saturday,
gosh,
I
I'm
mean,
I'm,
that
I'm
was
mad.
going to happen,
I'm
right?
I'm mad. I'm missing. I'm mad that I had to work last evening and missed the Chiefs Bills game. I still haven't seen it. I'm mad
I
at myself.
I am not a huge NFL fan, one of the few people in the United States. However, I recognize great athletic achievement when I see it and drama when I see it. And that was a no miss. The entire country was watching. Even the day before, all of the games were extremely competitive this weekend. The weekend prior, blowouts. You still see huge ratings. So nobody's going to put up their best product right now. Boxing fans have to look at this and say, okay, some guys, some good, honest talents are getting good, honest work. Is it world class? No. But they're getting some fights in under their belt. A dozen, uh, pairs of guys are going to get the opportunity to have fights this weekend and progress in their careers. And so we have to understand it for what it is. And, in a way, be grateful that we've got something to watch, because on a lot of weekends like this, people just say, yeah, we'll wait till the playoffs are over.
And quickly on this, I gotta give condolences to mutual friend of ours, Ernie Green, um,
Uh,
as well as
by the way,
personal friend of mine,
anybody checked on him? Is he all
well
right?
as
Not really
well
sure.
as a personal friend of mine, Miss Brooks. Both of them avid Buffalo Bills fans. I know y'all have to be hurting right now, given that crushing defeat um, against
Oh,
Kansas City. Josh Allen. Even though I've seen highlights of it, but I haven't seen the game in its entirety. I've seen highlights, and Josh Allen just played the game of his life
yep,
last night, and yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
He played
Mahomes,
the game of
man,
his life. But
Mahomes just wouldn't let him have it.
when you left 13 seconds left in the game, and Mahomes does that. Now, that's especially stinging to Cowboys fans too, because that's about as much time that they had when Dak ran that route inside, and they had to haul it to the field and lost the game as time expired. But we Ernie could probably take solace in the fact that he's not going through a table. He would not follow the Buffalo tradition of going through a table. I think that's what he promised if the Bills made the Super Bowl.
Yeah, absolutely. And quick word here, quick note here. We mentioned Conceicao in the fight against Valdez. Moscow Valdez, during our timeout, it was announced that he's going to fight unification bout against Shakur Stevenson. That's why it's going to happen April 30th, I believe, on one of the ESPN networks. So I just want to put that note out there. Excellent fight. I'm glad that it's happening. Stevenson coming off of his dominant performance against Jamel Herring against the Valdez. Even though he's champion, yeah, there's still more questions than real answers about him. And put a gun to my head right now, I would make Shakur Stevenson the pretty considerable of a favorite going in. But let's move on from that fight to I mean, I put it in the docket. Makabu and Mchunu. This is a rematch of a fight in 20 uh, in which Makabu beats him. I believe I want to say in give me a quick second. They fought each other in 2015. Makabu won. Um, Close fight it was, but Makabu knocked him out in the 11th. I mean, for those who have an opinion on it, Makabu was in the Canelo Week sweepstakes, but he's putting his WBC cruiserweight title on the line. For anybody who has any thoughts on this, yeah,
Well, it is, as we record this podcast, Monday. This is a Don King promotion. Yes, you actually heard that correctly.
not even on television.
In Warren, Ohio. I'm not entirely convinced this is going to take place. We'll let you know next week on the podcast.
Okay, I'll try to jump in on this, unfortunately, because uh, we do have to mention that Makabu. Remember, this is the fight for the Canelo sweepstakes at cruiserweight because because everybody knows he wanted to pull that thing before he mandated to fight David Benavidez, and unfortunately, yeah, from a fight perspective, I expect the same result that I did in 2015. So really, not much has changed, and yeah, it's not going to affect anything. Canelo won't run for negotiations when it comes to it, even though there's probably no negotiations happening. But like Gail said, this is a Don King production. And for the past, I don't know what, 6, maybe 7 years, there's always been speculation of the fact that the next Don King show would be the last Don King show. Because he hasn't really signed, luckily, a lot of fighters recently. He still technically has Trevor Bryan, which God knows that whole mess with the WBA. He still has that. I think Amir Imam is still unfortunately tied to him. Hopefully not, but it is what it is. We also probably going to have a good friend of the program, Carlos Toro, be probably the hope cross his fingers may not be the only media member that goes to this thing, considering the location.
Actually, there's a possibility, fingers crossed, that a member from Three Kings Boxing will be at this card. So he's not the only one.
See, Carlos, you're not going to be the only one. You're not going to be the only one. I was afraid of that too. Because why have that fight in the middle of Ohio around this time? And like I mentioned, we don't even know if this is going to happen. By Wednesday, we may hear that this fell apart. There's no money involved, and that Donkey Promotions or Productions has finally shuttered its doors. Because unfortunately, a lot of those employees have been awaiting that word for a long time. And unfortunately, Don is still kicking. He's technically, in many ways, the Vince McMahon of boxing promoters. A little bit old in the tooth and very much out of touch.
Quick last word before we begin ready to sign things off. I want first of all thank everybody who joined us in the live chat. Gus, aka Corruption in Boxing, Ron, EJ Boxing Live. But I didn't mention this in the chat. This is complete my error on this brain freeze on my part. But highly anticipated trilogy between Juan Francisco Estrada, Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez. They fought one of the fights of the year in 2021. They were set to fight March 5th, but word broke late last week, over the weekend, really, that Estrada is not feeling well. He's ill. The rumor is that it is complications of COVID-19. For anyone who wants to touch on this before we sign off, any quick words? Do you have any updates?
Well, sitting here in San Diego tonight, I am thoroughly heartbroken. Hopefully, Estrada is just suffering some ill effects of COVID that will pass. It will get him back on track and we'll get this fight back on track for everybody, especially me because it's in my hometown. And we are very excited to have this fight in our midst. Then right here along the border where all of our Mexican counterparts can join us for this big fight.
Indeed. I think we're going to end matters on that note. I want to thank everybody who joined us on the live chat. I appreciate those who take the time out to listen to the show later on. If you like what you heard, please hit that like button on YouTube. Please subscribe to us on YouTube, or if you're checking us out on the podcast realm, Please follow us there, be it Apple Podcasts, be it Google Podcasts, be it Spotify, be it Anchor, anywhere and everywhere else in between. Um, and please, if you're checking us out on Apple Podcasts, please leave a review, 5-star review. Will get read on the show. I'll go to the panel here. Begin the show with ladies first. Want to end the show with ladies first. Gail from Communities Digital News and Why Fights. For those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk media, for those who want to check you out occasionally on TMZ Live, let the folks know where they can find you.
Well, I would like to thank you, the listener, for letting us get this off our collective minds here tonight. We had a lot of heavy topics, and if you're still with us, thank you. And hopefully, you have got some things to think about, and have plenty of opinions of your own to carry on this conversation outside the confines of the podcast. So you can find my regular column at both Communities Digital News. That's COMM Digi News, comdiginews.com, and also nyfights.com, where I am about to dive into a big time investigative report on the Abraham Nova mascot. So stay tuned.
And for those who are checking the show out on YouTube, let the folks who wonder what that Avi is that you're displaying right now, Gail.
That is, in fact,
the thumbnail, I should say.
yeah, that is, in fact, Abraham Nova, who had an excellent performance here a couple weekends ago at Turning Stone. And behind him to the upper left is his mascot. Yes, he's got his own 7-foot tall mascot, Gritty, and the San Diego Chicken. You'd be very impressed. Got the full beard, shadow boxed, walked him out, did the ring walk with him. The mascot has some moves. It's his first appearance. It was the hit of the night, life of the party. At the venue, he was posing for photos. He was a complete selfie magnet. And it all joking aside, this is a very smart promotional branding move by this young fighter out of Puerto Rico, who is based in Brooklyn, Abraham Nova. So it's an interesting object lesson and discussion about branding in boxing, which is something we have been discussing when we talk about a Terence Crawford and other fighters. So while we're going to have fun with it, there is some serious discussion to be had about branding for athletes and whose role that is. So we'll get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Nova, who fought on this Joe Smith Geffrard undercard, I believe it was.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, Gail, he was impressive in the stoppage win. And even though he is world ranked at 130 pounds, called out after the fight. He called out a guy who's considered the boogeyman by a lot of folks at 126 pounds, Emmanuel Navarrete. He says he's willing to go down to featherweight and he wants a piece of him, and made his case loud and clear after the fight. And now I want to see that fight happen. Bob Arum, get to it. He's calling out your dude. Let's hope that fight happens later on this year. I would like to see it. I'll go to you, Daniel. Daniel from For Boxing News, Indian Scriber. For those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk pro wrestling, and I know you just dropped a recent episode with a guy I know, Bill. Y'all went at it for a good length of time talking wrestling. For those who want to talk wrestling, boxing, let the folks know where they can find you.
Yes, folks, you can find me on Twitter, Rux99, RAWKUZ99. Definitely catch me on there. Actually, me and Bill are going to probably get back into it on Thursday, as I know a lot of things happen. A lot of things has happened, unfortunately, since that episode, and with the Royal Rumble coming up. Which, by the way, I am picking the Nova mascot, Anthony Nova's mascot, as the dark horse to win the 2022 Royal Rumble. And
You heard it here, everybody, right here.
Again, I co-sign Gail, and I thank everyone listening who took the time out to let us get that stuff off of our chest as it pertained to particularly to the segment about three knockdown rule. Uh, Episode is now in the ether, but hashtag never forget. Have had to take some time out to discuss that, and we went into a lot of detail for those who are checking us out live or late listening live. Just hit the rewind button and listen to what we had to say. For those who want to talk boxing, music, fitness with me, you know what it is, Brother JR and Brother JR 76. Um, as I said at the beginning of the show, if you want to check out all things Pound for Pound Boxing Report, you can do so on the site, p4pboxingreport.com. On there, you'll have links to what to follow us all over social media, Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, um, YouTube, IG. Also, links to where to donate. Let donation be the best nation. Now that it's officially tax season, if you got a little bit of coin left over, and if you feel like shooting some a dollar, $2, $5, uh, whatever you can spare without hitting your own personal bank book, please shoot some coin to Pound for Pound Boxing Report to help overall production. And again, even though I'm not a Beachbody online coach right now, I still urge you to check out Beachbody on Demand. Plenty of programs on there, fitness programs for all your student interests. If you want to get into some shape in 2022, at the very least, I strongly urge you check out the 2-week trial. For 2 weeks, you get free access to all programs on Beachbody on Demand. If you're looking for a boxing-based program, 10 rounds is one I would urge that you take a look into. Again, 3 day, uh, 3 days boxing based cardio, 2 days resistance work. Really, really solid program. So, yeah, again, want to thank everybody for checking us out. On the next episode, we will do a recap of Conceicao, Martinez, Makabu, and Mchunu. Trevor Bryan is also fighting on that Makabu undercard. Okay, he's a quote heavyweight champion, but let's be let's keep it a buck here. Nobody really talks about him. Will we talk about him on the show? Yeah, who knows? But anyway, we'll talk at the very least about the Mchunu fight and the Conceicao fight, and we will do a preview of what will be uh what will be a very when boxing will really start heating up at the beginning of February. On the 5th, the return of Keith Thurman. He's going to fight Mario Barrios. A really solid overall card here. This happening on Fox pay-per-view in Vegas on the undercard. The return of Leo Santa Cruz, coming off of his vicious knockout loss to Tank Davis. He returns to the ring. Jose Cito Lopez is on that card. Luis Neri, he's also on that card. That's going to be in Las Vegas on the Fox pay-per-view. Also in Vegas, the rematch between Teresa or Juan Gusai and Carlos Quadras, a women's title fight. Jamie Mitchell defending her women's um, bantamweight title. Also on that same date on the 5th, over in the UK. This fight is still on. Correct me if I'm wrong. Between Eubank Jr. and Liam Williams, right?
So far, yeah,
So,
it should still be on.
so far, again, the pandemic is still getting a say.
Cool. On the undercard of that fight, the return of Clarissa Shields, as she's moving up to middleweight, fight for BC, WBA, IBF titles, fighting Emma Kozin, and the hope that should she win, that will lead into the big fight for her against Savannah Marshall. They're talking about a Shields Marshall bout for the summer, later on this summer. So a lot to preview next week. I want to again thank everybody who joined us in the live chat. I want to thank everybody in the live chat. Yeah, so for Gail from Communities Digital News, NY Fights, for Daniel for 4 Boxing News and Event Scriber, I am your host, Michael. This has been episode 350 of the Pound for Pound Box Report. We will see you guys next time. Everyone have a good evening. Good night. Rest in peace, Meatloaf. Rest in peace, Bob Saget. Rest in peace, Meatloaf. Rest in peace, Bob Saget. Rest in peace, Sidney Poitier.